we wanted to have a podcast on breaking in. If you're new and you're trying to break into a role,
this is the podcast for you.
This is the podcast.
Yes,
because we're going to talk about breaking into security and penetration testing. We're going to talk about breaking into product, and we're going to talk about breaking into agile coaching. And welcome to the podcast, Steve. Steve's first time on the podcast. Steve, you're a penetration tester. What is your actual job title?
A lead web application penetration tester.
I don't know if you can say it all sexy like that. Hang on.
Lead web application penetration tester.
That is a lot of. That's
a
lot of
mouthful.
Words, to start us.
Yep.
How did you break into your current career and role? The working agreement for the podcast, we don't name names or we don't name companies. So
Sure.
I'm not asking you how you got your current job. I'm just saying, how did you get started in a career? Like, how did you break into it?
I started in IT.
Like help desk IT?
Like help desk. I
yeah.
did, it's kind of like a local site network admin type deal.
Nice.
Reported to other network admins. So, I had to pay my dues, you could say. Penetration testing is obviously, it's a very desired field and it's very difficult to jump into from no experience.
Right. Yeah.
You have to really earn some certification stripes to show that you understand the technology that you're working with.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're talking about this topic. Who's an enterprise agile coach, and I I'm a product manager. Like, our industries both have full certification bodies, but the certification bodies, they only get you some of the way. You know what I mean? They only get you. They outline the basics. They let you, I don't know, speak the language. Be able to speak language. Maybe.
I think that's the biggest benefit. Really, is just getting the the terms, the terminology, right? But they don't really help you break into anything without experience. Right. Kind of similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
And the reason that I feel this topic needs to go up now, right, not later, is like where I'm hiring for product managers, and like the resumes that I'm seeing come in, like so many people coming straight out of school or trying to switch from other career fields that maybe not are even relevant to product management, just trying to jump into it with no experience. And we did a podcast with Stormy where we talked about entry into product management, how people get their start in product management.
Right.
And the summary, I'm saving you all time. I'm like the AI of podcast summarization, except I'm a real person. Or am I? Was people
Matrix is real.
People, I don't know, maybe people get their, are we in a simulation? People get their start from domain expertise and then jump to product management, or they start with development teams and then they jump to product management. But like, nobody just comes out of school and goes straight into product management. But there are large companies that do have APM, associate product manager roles, but they are very few and far between. Most people make a lateral switch.
Yeah, absolutely. So those that do have that, it's still very difficult to break into that, even with those companies, because they reserve those spots for those that they put through this thing called tour of duty. Basically, what you just go around all the departments and spend a few months with people and see where you stick, basically, right?
Yeah.
If you show the eagerness toward product, then they may keep you. Otherwise, they're going to punt you over to finance or legal or wherever else, right? It is very difficult to break into product management without any experience. Right. And this is one of the same thing I think is true of agile coaches too, by the way, because I see all the time people sitting in a 2-day class, they come out with a cert, brandish that around and then go, hey, look, I'm a scrum master. Scrum master is supposed to be coaches, therefore I'm an agile coach, right? Hire me, please. Yeah. And it's hard for them because they haven't gone through the school of hard knocks, right? They haven't had their ears boxed.
They haven't lived Scrum yet.
They haven't, right? Exactly.
Like, you've got the credentials. It means you have a basic understanding of it, but you haven't lived it yet. You haven't gone through
also like the
product release failures,
like
and
the business leader
back.
In that example. I guess I'm playing the other side of this. I guess I'm the villain today.
Devil's advocate.
Somebody's advocate. I hope this is a paying role. I could see a business leader scoffing at, what, you're going to coach me? A person brand new to the career, or whatever, 6 months, 18 months, depending on where they are in their journey. It could be 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Like, oh, you've been working here 7 years. You're going to tell me something? They could have that attitude. I'm not defending that attitude. I'm not saying it's good or bad.
No, but you're spot on, though. I mean, look, having done this for many years, I still get that attitude, right?
Right, yeah.
Leadership, you go into them and say, listen, I want to talk to you about a better way of working. Screw that. I came up through the ranks by stomping over people. Right. That's the way to work, because I'm successful doing it that way. Yeah. So don't come here telling me how to do stuff, right? I feel that. So how's a new person with a shiny new certificate, right, going to fare in that scenario? Yeah. They will be eaten for breakfast. I have a question though. So in the space you're in,
Yeah.
What is the intake model for people that are coming in? Like, how do they come in, and how do they get to, not necessarily where you're at, but just to even work in the space? Is there some kind of, I don't know, internship, some kind of German model? I'm not sure really, because I don't know that space.
I don't know either.
It depends on the person, right? There's people that have no problem getting into the field because they know what they're doing from having experienced it. There's a unique set of individuals that have some success with no credentials, and it's because they have an advanced understanding of the technologies that are kind of like the target for, you know, whatever assessment team they're trying to apply for. And that's really what it boils down to at the end of it, right? So somebody that's coming out of college with no real like experience, they haven't blown up a network from doing something wrong in Active Directory, they haven't seen the repercussions of doing untested activities in a controlled environment, or, you know, a major network environment, without impacting people and impacting the business. And it's kind of where I think a lot of the caution with newer individuals comes into play, because what they're hiring is somebody who's going to be an expert in the technology that, you know, that they're going to be testing, and they have to be able to articulate or explain how these other technical professionals that have hired them are supposed to be able to resolve and remediate the findings that they, you know, identify throughout the testing.
There was a period of time where I had to hire QA testers and QA engineers when I was a manager, QA manager, right?
Yep.
And I had engineers. You can't just hire engineers off the street. They don't make just, people don't come out of school as a QA engineer. Like, people have to learn that skill. Okay, let's move that off the table. That's a different podcast. But I would hire people into like their first corporate job as like a QA tester. Right. I'm not expecting them to rip whole applications apart. I'm not expecting them to, you know, come up with top to bottom tests of the, you know, all of the layers, all of the network layers. You know,
that's what you get security testers for.
I'm not expecting that out of them. I'm expecting them to run the tests that the analyst kind of outlines and kind of help relieve some pressure off the analysts that are engaged in some manual testing while we're waiting to automate things that need to be automated. So they are doing a valuable function to the business.
Yep.
They're playing the game in that little space between when we're still manually doing stuff, but before we've automated, you know, the permanent solution, basically.
Right.
Very valuable. And when I'm hiring people for that role, there's a whole bunch of stuff in my head, because what I heard out of what you just said was the technology aspect is like, can they interpret the technology? Can they talk about it and communicate it in a meaningful way back up to whatever stakeholders, whoever they're talking about, right?
Right.
Like, well, why are you holding up my application? Well, I have to tell you why I'm holding it up. Now I've got to communicate like technology concerns to business stakeholders that may not care why I'm holding things up.
Yeah. In addition to that, right, they're having to articulate that at different levels. You've got the technical people that are going to fix it. You've got, you know, management teams that have to oversee the entire project, and then there's, you know, in rare occurrences, you've got executives that just want, you know, what are the basics? What do we need to green light?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, what's our permit to operate?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say executives that they're just looking for the red lights to go green. Or
they just want to know that
they just want to know that things are.
They want to know things are moving, so they can report on their quarterly report.
That's exactly right. When I was a QA manager, I'm hiring people. Like, I'm hiring people for I want to say a natural skill set. That's not really what it is. I'm hiring for like a set of attributes of like, they're not necessarily experience. They're a set of attributes of a person. Is like, are you the type of person that is you're not satisfied with just what is told to you? You need to go deeper. Are you the kind of person that needs to know why things are working the way they're working? Because
so it's leaning more into mindset.
Yeah,
mindset versus you know, skill sets. Are they able to easily pick up what I'm going to convey to them and maintain that mindset that intrigued you, that you knew that you had going into that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So how did you get into? So you started in like help desk IT support, and was it a jump from there to this, or was there other layers?
There's other layers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, you know, going from more of a support role, then you end up going into, you just kind of take whatever you can get at that point, right? Because you know you're a support guy. Nobody's going to give you just the keys to the castle and say, hey, run this thing. So as you're playing with more technology, obviously you want to show that you're capable of handling more. So I honestly, as I was doing these support roles, I started picking up some self-paced training kits for Microsoft exams, and I went and got my MCITP while that was a very short-lived exam. They went from MCSA, MCSE to MCITP, which they added the different variations of that, and then they went straight back to MCSA, MCSE. But it was like cloud solutions. But yeah, from there I started, I went and did like a Red Hat cert. And then, I ended up going to a larger firm doing, identity and access management.
Oh, nice.
So it's, dabbling around in I and AM. Yeah. And meanwhile, the entire time, I just picked up coding as I was going, right? I liked the idea of being able to perform complex tasks very lazily.
Right. Yeah. I feel like, again, as someone who did network admin for the QA team, right? I feel you on that one, because it was like, it's not about being lazy. If I can script this and know that it's just being done, I can do other things and learn other skills, and I can do more interesting things to me. And if they're more interesting to me, most likely they'll be like more interesting to the business as well. When they see me growing past the original role they brought me into, which is like every business's like dream to have your employees kind of figure out where they're going when they're with you.
Yeah, because when you're sitting there, it's like you're basically filling out you're completing tickets anyway. Right. So once you fill that check mark, like you can move on to other things that either interest you or next thing in the queue. So yeah, that wasn't it, right? So it went further. I took a role doing application management in a larger, much more significant cybersecurity centric role, right? So we're talking just strictly application level support for Splunk, Symantec, DLP, Enterprise.
I can easily see the progression from from anyone who is earlier in their career or trying to break in. I can easily see the leaps that you have made are tiny leaps. But if you look at it from far away, it's a massive leap up the Penta. But in reality, it was like all of our roles that we kind of talked about, the commonality now that we kind of talked about it, all was like you got started because there was some sort of like help desk, network administration, that those kind of roles, and then it was a tiny step up to like IDAM or INM or IAM, whatever you want. IAM.
Identity and access management.
Like AWS just calls it IAM.
IAM.
Like I think Microsoft calls it IDAM, IDAM, little d AM. Anyway, like I can see the little steps. You know what I mean? The tiny, because if you're administrating a network and you get the chance, like in my tiny little network, I was administrating Active Directory for all the users and applications, by the way. It's a tiny step from saying like, hey, I can reliably administrate a couple of Active Directory servers for authentication, and I was doing DNS and a bunch of other stuff like that. And I can do it reliably and keep us, have our whatever 5 nines uptime or whatever it was back in the day that everyone used to shoot for.
Big
you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. It's like
you got the 5 nines. It's like what, 12 minutes a year, or 8 minutes a year.
Help desk people just nerded out on the podcast.
Sometimes it's the frustrations of the system you're working with at the time.
Yeah.
That kind of, you get to learn more about something else that might be better. I know for me. Look, I played around with Novell networks back in the day, and it frustrated the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I started looking at other networks.
That's what I remember.
It's just
That's what I remember about Novell.
It was very frustrating. It was very frustrating. That should have been their trademark.
As soon as he said it, I was
Novell,
just like,
we are frustrated.
I don't know if I want to make a statement on something at this point in the podcast.
I feel a statement coming on.
I kind of do. I'm thinking about the commonalities in the stories right now, because like the commonalities here are you had to go. I'm not saying you had to like put in your time or whatever, in whatever role or at the bottom.
Some people do, have success moving straight in. I would say a colleague, he runs a business now and he moved from accounting. So it's obviously there's, some people that would see this that might know who I'm talking about, but he made his stride to go from accounting to pen testing with a cert. Yeah. And, sometimes that certification is kind of a gatekeeper. Offensive security is one of the, top certs out there because it's a practical exam. It's not like, just take a,
multiple choice.
It's not a multiple choice, right?
Yeah.
Here are the answers in front of you. Guess which one.
Right.
There's an educated guessing system there where it's like, I've seen this. It's probably this answer.
Yeah.
And chances are you're probably going to lean towards the correct answer. But when you have practical exam, you have to show your skills and then report on it, and then it's a very strenuous exam.
Well, we talked about that before you showed up. We briefly talked about that when we were talking about the agenda for today, because we were talking about leveraging your network. Like if Scrum Masters, I go straight to Scrum Masters for this exact example. Like the Scrum Master community in the community, like they know who the top people are at the people that are showing out to all the events, the people that have good advice versus like the people that are just kind of piping up with bad advice, or just like kind of regurgitating what the book says or whatever.
There's a lot of those guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but they're trying to make an entry into the field because they've read they can make six figures and they've read that they can, maybe they don't.
That's the big seller for everybody.
Yeah, that's why I felt strongly about this podcast. Is like I feel it, like pen testing. Much like product management, a lot of people are trying to jump directly into it. I'm gonna graduate college or whatever, and then I'm gonna go straight into being a pen tester. I don't think that's a career path. Just like product management, I don't think you go straight from college and jump straight into it.
I'm gonna go back to it, right? So it can be. But one of the things I learned going to B-Sides is that I was looking at these for hire boards, right, where students were putting like their name and what they were looking for. Yeah. And a lot of these index cards, like index stickies that they were posting on these boards, would say just anything, experience, internship. One said full time with benefits. I'm like, all right, somebody's missing the picture, or the picture's not being fully painted for them. So if there's somebody looking for pen testing, it's a lot more than just finding findings, right? It's understanding the technology and being able to articulate them. And you can even relate to this with like coming from a QA testing background, right? So you're supposed to test a field in a form and make sure it aligns with the input restrictions that the developer intended for that particular field. Our job is to take it much further than can I plug in 1,000 A's, or we're looking for, can we get SQL injection? Can we get cross-site scripting on it? We're looking for a lot more than just, did this cause an error? But the even more difficult thing that some of the younger people that are wanting to get into it, they're solely focused on like the CTF aspect, right? Because those are the biggest areas where they can pick up some of these skills. Is like some CTFs online, like they've got like Hack the Box, they've got Try Hack Me. There's a different variety of CTFs that are out there. Capture the flag. So it's here's this box, you've got to capture these flags on these systems, and if there's a preset preordained amount of vulnerabilities available to reach these flags.
That's our NFRs. That's our non-functional requirements. The test doesn't say that you need to try SQL injection on this field. That's right. But like your senior tester will do it, and now your developer who's getting hammered because it allows SQL injection will be like, why would you ever test that? No user's ever going to do that. Do we really need to fix that? And now we're in a fight. Like now like we're in places that like, oh, this is outlandish, Brian. You're being ridiculous. Look at you in your high def. I've been in this discussion many times in my career.
So I have to, and this is what happens during those discussions, right? So developer says, I didn't pay attention to that. It wasn't in the user story.
That's right.
Product owner, you're to blame. You didn't put it in there as an NFR. Product owner's like, isn't it common sense? Can we just add another story to fortify this thing before we put it out in the wild? No, because I want to call it done, says the developer, right? Otherwise, it's not done, so it's a slide against me.
Right.
That's what happens. It's a huge cluster at that point. So you want to have an organizational view on this, at least at a departmental level, maybe a domain level view, I guess, and say, what does it really mean for us before we say something is done, right? Is it okay to say development's done and testing's done and we can go to stage, but we can't go to production? Fine, if that's your purview, okay. But if it's not, because the customer's not seen any value yet, right? Then we have to think about all these things, right? Yeah. You don't want to deliver something that you think is done and it's vulnerable.
Yeah, there's just a lot of smaller teams or organizations that just don't have the capacity to have their own web app security testers on site, or even just paying, because obviously static scanning capabilities, there's a pretty penny involved with being able to have that functionality, even just like a cloud instance, let alone getting the hardware on-prem to do your own static code analysis with all the code before it reaches a production environment.
Yeah, I've had to explain to investors like why we were or were not doing like static analysis on our code, because they're like, what? They're like, what the heck, man? You can just plug this in and it just runs automatically, and it's not really a big overhead to you. Just implement it for the first time and then
push
it just
a button.
runs. And I'm like, oh boy. I was like, oh, like you guys don't really realize like the phase of development we're in. Like products are in different phases of development, trying to catch that the wins of that product market fit to launch the company, that's one phase. Trying to sustain and grow your product and have it kind of take off in the market and keep building and year over year growth and stuff like that, that's one phase. And then spinning it down and deciding we're not going to work on stuff anymore. We're going to spin new features out. We're going to bring up new products next to it. We're going to try to leapfrog our current product. We're going to sunset this product, basically. That's a whole nother phase. There's 3 big phases of product development. And usually when you talk about stuff like that, you need to be real clear about what phase you're in to be like, hey, static code analysis, like testing all of our endpoints, testing the interface and stuff like that. Like, I'm not ready. Like, I don't care about that. We need to rush features out as fast as possible. I feel like I didn't mean to go here to challenge, because that's where I feel like I'm going. That's where I feel like I'm going. But there are startups out there that are like, I don't, if it blows up, I don't care. Like, they're willing to take the risk, basically. Sure. That's what I'm saying.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
The finding is, hey, you've got this issue.
Right.
This is the risk associated with it. You either fix it or don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really somebody else's risk appetite is not my risk appetite.
Absolutely correct.
Like, if I find it and I let you know about it, I've done my job.
It's almost like a doctor saying, listen, I need you to give up smoking, lose weight, etc. You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
But he's done his job, right?
Yep.
I think some industries, specifically I think regulated industries, they tend to look at this a little bit more closely. Like, they don't want to risk losing everything that goes with it, right? The financial industry is another one that they really don't want to put stuff out there that could potentially, sink them. I mean, the vulnerability varies in size and impact, etc., right? So, fine. But it could have very low impact, but it could have very high visibility. And that is going to cause tremendous rep damage for that organization. Right. And they don't want to take that chance. Right. It's not like you're losing millions of dollars, but you are. You're not losing millions of dollars through that vulnerability so much, because you could, hurry up behind it and patch it, which is what you see all the time.
Right.
But it's already out there. Hey, you had released this, and that rep damage, you just can't put a value on it.
Well,
it's just,
again, that's where I was going back to, is you need to understand what phase your application is in. And it's, I say your application because I'm a product manager, and that's the way I think. Other people listening to this, you can interpret that as, like, because a lot of smaller businesses or medium businesses as well, like, their application is their business.
Sure.
So you can take what I'm saying and apply it to your business. What phase is your business in? Is your business in this growth phase where, like, technical debt? It's cool. Let's incur all the technical debts. It's cool, no problem. We'll fix them later when we get there. Because the point of this part of this part of the business's development is grow as fast, move as fast as possible. Yeah, capture market as fast as possible. Yeah. We know we're gonna have problems. We know people are manually doing things that should be automated. I think the same way I think about QA, where whenever we would launch products from the ground up, we would have to go through this. It's like, hey, we got a lot of problems. These tests fail. These things blow up the system. And then we'd have a conversation of, like, well, how often do people do them? And what is, is this on the user journey map of the normal user's journey through the application? Is this a regular thing? Is this an edge case? What is it? And we would have to talk about it. This is where we get back into mindset. I hope that this portion can be helpful to somebody listening to this podcast, because if you work in QA especially, like, I'm specifically talking to my lane right now, you'll get to a point where you're like, well, yes, you found a bug. Yes, like, it's important. We all agree that it's not a good bug or whatever. But we're not going to fix it. We've decided together we're not going to fix it. And the QA person might not be happy about that. Well, because they see it like it's a defect. It's something, whatever. I don't know how they, some QA people get judged by the defects that slip through QA. They call it escape defects, whatever.
Yeah.
And they might not be happy about that, right?
You mean the features?
Yeah, hidden features. Or QA might have found it, and they might have found it in the sprint. Like before it went to production.
Oh, before then, it's not escaped.
It's not escaped yet. But then the product manager or whatever is like, I know I want the functionality more than I care about people being impacted by this. Send it out. So you, as QA in that instance, it lets you engage in a business discussion, which is much bigger than the technology, the development department, the little feature you're working on, whatever. It lets you engage to say, do we, as an organization, want to take on XYZ risk? And let's talk about it. Let's talk about the worst case. Let's talk about the standard, the day-to-day operations, best case, I guess. And let's try to put money to that if possible. Because remember, going back to our podcast where I was like, you should put money to all your metrics. Like, let's talk about the money involved, how many support hours it might generate. Let's bring it to support and let them know that this is going to go out there to prep them to better deal with it. So there's training costs, there's coordination costs, there's stuff like that. The normal QA department that I think of, they don't really, like, most of them don't think like that. Most people don't think like that. They don't think like that. Is that like we're helping the business mitigate risk, and sometimes that means we don't fix things and risk goes out.
Right.
They have good policies for trying to stop risk from going out, but once we all agree risk is going to go out, that's where the policies kind of break down.
Yeah, I think it's crucial to have that partnership with product people, right? Because they're the ones that are actually measuring the risk. It can be as little as, well, we don't know who it's going to impact out there, so we'll deal with it when we start hearing from people. Right? We understand it's broke, but we need to get it out there because there are all these other features that are going in that release. People are wanting those,
vital,
right?
Vital to the business operation.
We'll put it out there. Or it could be the other extreme is, let's put it out there to a few users and see who notices. Or let's just roll it out. And the loudest voice, it will dictate what we do. If it's a big client that complains about it, well, maybe we'll fix it. If it's a smaller one, say wait for the next release. So there's a lot of options there, but the product people really need to engage in these discussions with the QA people, who are largely very, very analytical in their way of thinking, right? It's broke, therefore fix it, right? Because nobody wants to release a broken product. But sometimes you have to take a holistic view and say, yeah, we know that's a little rough on the edge, but hey, let's just put it out there because, all these other things that are going in that release, we've been waiting on for a while, and we can take that risk.
Are there times when you push something out that like there are problems?
Well, from a pen test perspective, great.
What you mean, like a finding?
You might not push them out, but like you.
I don't push the product out, but I do push them. I push them findings out. Look, it's not my business what they do with it, right? My business is whether or not they've acknowledged the risk and whether or not they're doing what they need to do with it, right? If they are doing like a deviation or action plan, action plan would probably be the best phrase for it, right? If they understand that they have a policy deviation, but the risk is maybe mid or higher on a technical level, somebody that has to sign off on the deviation or action plan has the final say on what happens with the application. I just point out the findings. To me, I have no personal feelings involved in it, and I think that's why we kind of operate in like a completely separated wheelhouse than just the sec dev cycle. We're completely independent, and there's no like personal way we feel about it. Like, these are the findings, and this is what's reported, and what you do with it is your business.
It brings up a question though. Where are the pen testers parked in the business?
I was just gonna go there.
Where they get to be, because like I've been in a lot of shops
typically like threat and like risk management side, right? So they typically go under like the CIO, CTO.
Oh, okay.
It depends. It depends on how the organization is structured.
That makes sense for them to be on a CTO. Yeah.
It does. Ultimately, there's somebody who is responsible, accountable is a better word, right? For business risk. So that person decides. To your point, you just say, look, here are the findings. Here's what we say they are. These are highs. These are mediums. These are lows. And then somebody's going to say, we can accept that, or no, we got to fix those, or we can accept some, fix others, etc. But then there's also, I think mainly in regulated industries, there's also another layer around that, where there's people that come in and look at that and they say, oh no, you have to fix that, or raise an exception, right? Raise an exception to that, and we'll consider it. They may or may not approve it.
That quote unquote action plan or deviation from policies.
Right, deviation policy is a good description for it, I think.
And I think a lot of them ultimately, and at the end of it, right, it depends on what the context of it is. Like, if they know willingly that they're going to hurt customers from it more likely than not, right? In all of the engagements I've done, they kind of do what's right based on that. But some things that just stick out, like, hey, this is going to make the application crash, you can get a deviation for that. And while you're building the workflow that prevents that on the back end, while you're waiting X amount of time, as long as it's not hurting the customers, there's no damage being done. Maybe some customers get frustrated the site's unavailable.
There's acceptable damage being done. So
Right.
I think you make a good point. Anytime there's a deviation, etc., right? When we say, I think in the old-fashioned risk management world, we used to say, accept the risk,
Yeah.
right? That just means that it's for a short, finite period of time.
Right.
You're not saying to heck with it and we're just going to go with that forever,
Right.
right? You're saying, yeah, we know about it, we're fixing it. Until then, this is an issue. Let
Right.
everybody know, or your customers know, hey, this is the situation. If you
Right.
do that, I think you're doing right by the customer. But then you have to come through and say, okay, now we fixed that, right?
Right.
At some point.
Right.
I mean, TBD, but at some point you have to do that.
Like the product management version of this is you're somewhere between feasibility and business viability. Somewhere what we're talking about sits between the two of these. Like you can't use software that every time you use it, all your stuff is exposed over the internet.
That's usability.
That's not yeah.
That's number two.
Well, usability is can users figure out how to use it. It's whether the solution works for various aspects of our business. Like I would argue this is business viability of you can't
Yep.
use a solution that is like has so many holes
Well,
that just water
if
pours
it's
in.
extreme, you're right.
You can't sail
If
a
it's
boat.
minor, or maybe not.
You can't sail a boat that has so many holes in the hull that you have to keep
If there's
bailing
small
water
holes,
out.
you can stick your thumb in it and get by. I mean, look, it's the small ones, right? It's the low ones I'm talking about.
It depends on the hole and
Yeah,
whether or not a
exactly.
thumb is going to fit.
This is where those businesses that really don't give a damn about their customers go, yeah, there's a hole, but it's on your side of the boat.
That's right. That's right.
right.
Exactly right. I'm going to hire a VP of your side of the boat,
And you're paying for
that's
that.
right. You're going to pay for it.
That's such a silly way to look at it. Yeah, there's no separation there between your part of the boat and my
Exactly.
part
The
of the
boat's
boat.
going to sink no matter what, right?
Right.
Exactly. That's why it's ridiculous but true.
It's so funny to me how many similarities between QA testing and pen testing there are.
It is.
Not surprising.
There's a lot.
They're really there's so many similarities. I'm kind of shocked that I know a lot of people that started in QA and where they are today, and I don't think any of them are in pen testing that I know of anyway. That people I intersected with in my career, which is shocking because I was like, this is like everything that they were doing plus a bit of networking plus a bit of tooling could have easily directed them to this stage of their career, right? But again, to go back to what we were talking about, like you had to start in a certain place, and like certain events had to direct you. So I don't know. Maybe it isn't.
Yeah, I would say the rocks would definitely skip a lot less for that particular type of path. So somebody that does specifically web app or web development, right, back end or front end, whatever part of the stack they're developing, would infinitely make them a more viable candidate for something that specializes in web app pen testing, just because of their underlying knowledge. The way that the back end code works and the way that inputs may or may not be sanitized on the front end to exploit those.
I wonder if this might be my most controversial hot take on a podcast. I wonder if people that are outside the career field looking to break in, I wonder if they look at it from the perspective of what can I use as a stepping stone to get to where I want to? Because this conversation to me in my head, if I was targeting getting into security specifically, if I were to go back earlier in my career and I was starting as like a QA tester with a focus on networking and network infrastructure and hardware and software, I could easily see like, well, I'm going to work here for 2 years, 18 months, whatever. I'm going to get a good understanding of network topologies, what the normal flow of requests, stuff like that are. And then I'm going to jump to another shop where I'm doing more of the Active Directory side of the networking, right? Active Directory, maybe network routing, network security, watching the traffic on the network, alerting, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I don't see a large leap. I see many small steps. On a staircase. It doesn't seem insurmountable to me. The thing I worry about with people entering the career field from outside is they see the alluring people on TikTok, or they see the alluring, the big product managers on LinkedIn that have 50,000 followers or whatever, and they're like, oh, you could be a product manager. Why do the plebe work? That work has a lot of value.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that. Those people that say that on those TikTok videos,
Well, they're trying to sell something.
They're trying to sell something. So they're saying, look, you can be a product owner in 2 weeks. Buy my course, right? That's what they're doing. And this is
They
not
do that
new.
with cyber too.
Same everywhere.
I've seen
Everywhere.
Well, we need another commonality.
Pay $40
Right.
and do this 1 year course or something
Yeah,
for
you can be a CISSP.
you'd be
or-
a cybersecurity expert in 12 months. It's like, wow.
I think that element persists across the
wow.
board, unfortunately, right? I'm still seeing people on the business side saying, hey, you don't need any business experience. Come join my program, which is only like 2 classes. Pay me $250. So I wanted to take us to a separate, like just a
Sure.
slightly different place here a little bit.
Let's go.
So one of the things I want to explore, especially with, with pen testing, really it applies to quality testing as well, agile coaching or
Yeah.
whatever. What do you think the implications are of AI going forward in this? Right? I mean, people say there's a lot of hearsay out there. People say, well, AI will automate everything and I'll lose my job, kind of thing. That's the extreme. But there's also the potential of AI to help people in their day to day. What does that look like from your perspective as a web app penetration tester? Do you think there's like potential there or value there to automate things so that you can get your job done faster, better, quicker, etc.?
I mean, there's a lot of tools that do offer automation in various styles of testing. There's a lot of companies out there that have products that do automated pen testing, and I'm sure they work great. I think there may be some levels of error because I've done some tests where some of the techniques that were presented from an automated test, they didn't have the same depth, right? And certain tools only go so far.
Right.
And yeah, I think that having AI available definitely will help write some pretty interesting tools, aside of just the automated testing piece of it.
Sure.
But I'm excited to see it, but at the same time, hope I still have a job later.
Well, so I think there's, I think there's the aspect of it
Yeah.
automating things for you, but humans are very good at using context, right? And at least from what I've seen so far, it cannot do that.
Well,
right?
It definitely can.
Right.
I can speak a little bit from this because I work with this on a regular basis. Like
Of
I
course.
work with data models and data labeling and stuff like
Yeah.
that. We were talking about testing. Well, let's not even go into pen testing, security testing. Let's just label it testing, a broad level testing. It may be able to displace you as a tester in the realm of testing websites. Let's say websites, web applications, HTML, and like the DOM layer testing. Okay, let's talk about that. It may be able to do that, but first of all, the model needs to be built around testing those applications. So you need to share test cases which have real examples built into the test
That's
cases.
the context I'm talking about.
So you have to share the automation that you've built, the model, so it can understand how those things are built. And enough companies with enough different types of software have to share with the people building the model. So there's roadblock number one, which is a huge roadblock, because companies are not willing to say, like, here's how we make sure our application is secure.
They're giving away their trade secrets
Just-
right there, so
just
they're
not
not going to
look.
do that.
Well, to further go into that, right, I'll talk about a real test case scenario, obviously no names. Yeah, there was a web app test we did for a client, and there was virtually no findings, right? So,
Okay.
we've got 2 weeks with this application, and we have to report by the 3rd week. So I'm just combing through tons of data that we've got from various API endpoints, within the web app that it's reached out to. And then, somewhere like 2-3 days into the 3rd week, like I stumble upon, a hidden gem underneath just this sea of informational data, and there's PII, leaked everywhere.
Oh no.
Everywhere. There's tons of it. And all of a sudden we've got a critical risk. And then we further probe and we inquire about payment vendors' solution, and they stumble upon something completely different. And it was something that does not fly under the standards and regulations they're supposed to comply with.
AKA a big problem.
A big problem. Big problem.
Yeah.
So I think AI is capable of doing a lot of things, but again, I can't say for sure whether or not what code is not just another if-then condition.
Procedural languages are procedural languages no matter what.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Right.
matter whether you're using COBOL or
Like it has
whatever.
to be trained to do that.
Well,
Yes.
no,
That's the key right
And-
there. The AI models have to be trained.
writing its own if-then.
So it's only as good as what the training is.
well, neural models are very smart, but
Yes.
but
there's a different conversation to be had with neural
but,
networks.
Again, it's only as good as what you train it on. And if you train it on a bunch of bad test cases, it's going to learn to test badly.
Right, but neural networks though.
There's only
that's
so many
a-
times that juice shop is going to be relevant in pen testing.
Right,
Just saying.
but neural networks are a different conversation, my friend. Okay, because the permutations are huge.
Yeah.
And so is that learning? Maybe not. Maybe it's just the data set. It's just
Right.
huge. It gets bigger.
Let's move to the wrap up by giving some advice. Like, if you were to try to break into your career field again today, knowing what you know, like, do you have some advice for people that would be on the outside? So basically, the equivalent of you on the outside of your career field now, trying to break into your career field. We'll go around the table. We'll start with you, Steve, and then we'll go to Om for Agile coaching. I guess I'll finish.
You'll finish. It sounds like.
I think it's really going to boil down to taking the time to be intimate with what your career is going to entail. I think a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier with the B-sides, the job board, or not the, I guess, seeking board.
Yeah.
They don't really seem to know exactly what they want to do. They just want to get in anywhere what they can get. But I mean, if you want to make a stride to offensive security, right, you have to take the time to network with people.
Yeah.
That's one thing, right? And I don't say, I'm not saying add 1,000 people on LinkedIn today. Make meaningful contacts, meet people at conventions, have a conversation with them, ask them about their day-to-day job. Take the time to understand what vulnerabilities are, how people should fix them, and how to articulate that. In addition to writing maybe a fake report for like a CTF, or not a fake report, right? Because you're spending the time to write out your findings for a report. Take the time to put yourself in a position where you have to explain that to somebody, and kind of like mentally prepare yourself to be challenged that, oh, this is not a risk. Well, how are you going to rebut that? Take some time to fully grasp what the vulnerability is, how to fix it, and take the time to understand what, back-end languages do. Learn programming.
You talked about
pick up so many things.
Yeah,
it's really just a passion for the art.
It really is. I think that's the biggest variable in all this is develop a passion. If you don't have it, if you want to go in that field, if you have it, great. Follow your dreams.
Yeah.
But you talked about understand how to fix vulnerabilities, etc. Those are core components, right?
Because it's one thing to sit there and explain it to an interviewer, right? What if the interview is asking you what kind of controls would you recommend to fix these vulnerabilities? If you don't have an answer for that, then they don't feel you sufficiently understand the vulnerability enough in order to move on to the next step. Like, they'll run out of questions faster because you don't have the ability to articulate those findings. If you want to have a successful interview, you have to be able to speak the language.
I agree with you. I just want to make that last little bit of a link there. Understand how to fix it. All of that is good.
Yeah.
Do that. That is needed. Absolutely. But understand why. What is the impact, right? Do we need to fix it now, later, or never, right?
A lot of things that they need to understand when they're doing a capture the flag element, most of the scenarios they're encountering are exploitation up to up to and including remote code execution. Either way, you're taking control of another system that's not intended for your control.
Right.
That's the worst case scenario. But being able to articulate the severity of certain risks, because they're not going to ask you about the remote code situation, right? They know that's the prize, right? Sure. They're going to ask you about a lot of the issues that they're going to run into with the day-to-day with all of their clients or customers. The cross-site scripting. They're going to ask you why is a secure flag, or they're going to ask you why the HTTP only cookie is relevant.
Right.
They're going to ask you what an IDOR is, and just various authorization questions about why is this wrong in an application.
Great answer. All right, so I guess it's me next.
You're next.
So one of the things I say to this topic is there are no silver bullets, right? So one of the things, if you're wanting to get into Agile coaching, just understand that it's a, I hate to do this because it's a cliche, but it really is a journey. I mean, you come into it and you learn, you get beat up, you get your ears boxed, you get up, you move on, rinse and repeat, right? And you get to a point where you say, I've had my ears boxed enough times where I know which way to duck when that punch is coming at me. Right. When you get to that point, you could say, okay, maybe I can stand up and last a minute in front of people. These are people that you're trying to coach, right? So a long-winded way of saying, you come out of college, you want to be an Agile coach, fantastic. I'd really like to see that. Here's what I have to say. 3 things, right? First of all, recognize that it's a path. You don't just walk into it. That's one. Second thing is seek out a mentor or a coach. There's a lot of them out there. I've been mentoring, coaching a long time. I've got 5 on the go right now. I do that.
That's your second point, but I really feel
mentors
that's your number one.
Mentors
That
are
might
very
be my
important.
number one point.
Find a mentor.
Find a mentor.
Honestly,
to learn from.
In your world too.
in my world as well. So just to branch on that real quick.
Please.
I had an instructor who actually passed away like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I told him I wanted to get into pen testing a long time ago.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an ethical hacker. I knew how to do this, knew how to do that. He's like, go learn IT first.
Uh-huh.
Go learn how systems work. Go learn how to, go learn how to code. Go learn how to scripts. Learn how these systems talk to each other, and then go for that.
Yep.
Because if you don't understand all of these elements, you're not going to have any value to express how to fix something or what the gravity is of misconfiguring something.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I think in all 3 of our cases, I think that's true, right? Get a great mentor that is, who's going to spend time with you and is vested in your success.
Mm-hmm.
You need that, right? Without that, you're really off to a non-starter, especially if you have no experience in the domain. Right? We were talking about people that come out of college and just want to get there, be an expert pen tester, 6 months in. Not reality, right? Same thing with
really
product ownership or Agile coaching. It's not reality. So that was, I think you're right, both of you, right? I think that might be actually my first point. My second point is take the time and do not be afraid to fail, right? There's safety nets underneath you. So if you fall, you're not going to hit the ground, like the circus metaphor, I guess. There is a safety net, which is you have no experience. So set it up that way and say, not as an Agile coach, however, this might be worth trying. And if it fails, you say, well, okay, when I'm an Agile coach, I know what not to say. That's as important as knowing what to say.
Right.
So that's my second point. And my third point is, please, please, please do not fall into the trap of obtaining a quick certification that says you're now ordained an Agile coach or product owner or pen tester. Please don't do that. There is no silver bullet in life. That's all I got to say.
Ramen. Sorry, it felt on point with the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
I'm going to wrap up our topic with, if I had advice for a younger version of me that wanted to break into product management, like I was not attracted to product management until it was like thrust on me as a role in addition to the rest of my roles. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Like I kind of like this. But like if I were to try to give advice as someone who is coming in with basically no experience, someone straight out of school or whatever, I would tell them another version of basically what you said is, number one, don't neglect your network. Your network is 50% of how you get a job.
I'm clapping here.
50%. Okay?
Yes.
So if you're not going to all the networking events in your area, if you're not showing up every week to multiple ones, if you're not learning who all the people are and where they work and what their inputs are, which ones are the ones that have good context in the field versus not, and then because product management intersects with so many other departments, areas, whatever, like where do you get your development experience? Where do you get your understanding of good architecture, bad architecture, Conway's Law? I got that stuff out of working on development teams for 10 plus years. I'm worried about people who come in to the PM job without the benefit of that 10 years of experience. And I have to, I'm forced to ask myself retrospectively for this conversation, does it require that much time to be spent? Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
But it's not zero.
Okay, probably not. But like that PM expertise, writing good stories, vertically slicing stories to make sure that we're delivering, focusing on does this matter to the customer or not, or is this somebody else? Is this a political feature that gets us runway? You know what I mean? Is this an architectural runway thing that allows us to develop more features without having to stop for a while to do stuff? All of that experience came from the first 10 years of my career where I worked specifically and exclusively on development teams. So the way that I came up, I would advise, like, find a role on a development team that will get your foot in the door. I use coding in every role I've ever been in, and they've all been different code languages, and that's okay. Because I feel like once you understand the basics, you can kind of move around and do different things. But anyway, find a mentor. Don't neglect your network. That was my first point. My second point was find a entrance into product development, which again, my interest was through the development teams. I think that's a great way to enter. I think there's a normal entrance into that career field through development, through QA, through whatever. I think there are entrances. So that's one way. And then from there, it starts you on the path of understanding how good stories are written, how good, air quotes, requirements are written. Potentially, if you're a QA, how good tests and test suites are written, right? If you keep driving your career and you move around to better and better places, you'll learn how the good shops operate, and you'll have in your history, in your rearview mirror, you'll see how the bad shops operate, and you'll be like, well, I need to steer away from that, right? And if you want to get to PM, if that's where you're eventually going, you're learning all these things, but at the same time, you're looking at the front windshield and keeping your eye out for the road markers where the PM meetings are happening and the PM networking is happening and the APM opportunities are available. Or even if you're not doing that and you let your management know, hey, I just want to be a fly on the wall when you guys are talking about business strategy and software finance and team organization and structure. I just want to hear how you walk through it. Just let me in the room when you guys talk about what new strategy are we going to go for. You know what I mean? Because as a PM, the difficult times as a PM that you will have when you break in, especially people who are in school and get an associate product management job for the first time, is you've never constructed a strategy for a business. You've never tried to align different departments to see what they can contribute to a business strategy that you're trying to launch. You know what I mean? Like a 0 to 1 type of product. And you've never had to deal with software finance. And you've never had to deal with like, well, maybe this team of 15 people, maybe we should cut them in half. And maybe we can go faster by having less people. Maybe we should cut this team of 15 into 3 and bring on another product manager. That those kind of scenarios, you haven't had to deal with any of that. So some experience dealing with business strategy, running a good business. You can get a lot of that out of books and podcasts and other material. You can get a lot of software finance out of just talking to people around your company. The financial accountants will be happy to talk to you about the in-depth
yes, they will. Yes,
tactics
they will.
of like, hey, how do I actually capitalize software development? Oh, let's talk about it. They'll be happy to talk to you about that. Trust me on that one.
They will, certainly. I think net, do not feel shy about seeking out mentorships, and to your point, right, get yourself involved in these other things that you mentioned already, the business meetings, right? So that you can understand the bigger picture, because you're playing at a lower level usually if you're on the team, so you don't really know the impact your work is having, your work, other teams' work, everybody's work, right, with the customer or with the organization as a whole. And then I know we've had several podcasts on this, but really try and understand, what is your business's vision? What is your company's vision? I think people need to understand the bigger picture. Right? We started talking about people that wanted to break into the industry with respect to, pen testing, application pen testing, or product management or agile coaching. If whatever you're doing and you don't have a really good vision on the contributions that not only you as an individual but your team is making towards the greater whole, you need to understand that. You need to understand it and align with it, because it's one thing to understand and then I think you made the point, Steve. You can go on your own, right? It's not going to fare well for you. Understand it, align with it, and then start to reach out to those people and say, here's what we're doing, by the way, towards our organizational vision. This is what my little microcosm of the organization is doing. You're building bridges. All of that is needed if you're wanting to break into any of these 3 things that we talked about today. I mean, just a given, I feel. And guess who can help you with that? All the things we talked about. Your mentors, your coaches, right? Network. They will make sure, your network. So they will make sure that they will advise you and say, you may be right, but, right? Because they've been there. They're seasoned. So take advantage of that, by all means.